of some ideology, some blue state agenda, anything like that. This is taking young men at their word. These are the kind of relationships that men say they want. The only way to get there is to support gender equality. So I want to leave you with one phrase tonight. One of the books that I did, which mercifully you did not quote when you were introducing me, one of the books that I did some years ago is a book called Against the Tide, and it was a documentary history of men who supported feminism in the United States, right? Men who supported feminism. So I know what you're thinking, the world's shortest book. But actually, it's the fattest book I ever did. It's like 600 pages long. And the reason it's so long is because I found documents from men dating back to 1776 of men who supported gender equality all through our history. And I want to leave you with one sentence that I found in those documents, written in 1916 by a writer in New York City on the eve of one of the great suffrage demonstrations, when hundreds of thousands of people, women and men, marched down Fifth Avenue in New York City and many other cities in favor of women's suffrage. And that because it's less than 100 years that women have even been able to vote in this country. And he sat there and he thought about what the ideas of feminism actually meant. And he wrote an essay in 1916 called Feminism for Men. And this is the first sentence of that article. Feminism, he wrote, will make it possible for the first time for men to be free. Thank you very much. So is it your plan that we'll have questions? People have questions or comments or anything like that? It's your turn. Can we have the house lights up now for this so I can see and other people can see? Thank you so much. Woo. Hi there. Objective opinion. Oh, goody. Okay, one brave person. All right.
Given that men are now a minority on most college campuses, can you make an argument that they need to embrace this feminine equality, even though they might be feeling really threatened?
There's two parts to your question. The first part was that now, as you probably all know, 60% of all college students in American college campuses across the country today are female, right? So it's, the balance has shifted entirely toward women. So, and then the second thing is, given that women now dominate, and women control virtually all the activities and the student groups and student organizations, and so don't men have to embrace this sort of changes, or more feminine side, I think that's what you were saying, because of that? Well, let me say two things about that. First, let's address the numbers, and then let's address the second part of what they're doing. If you say that women now dominate, you get the idea that women's enrollments have increased and men's enrollments have decreased. That's not true, okay? More people are going to college than ever before. The rate of increase for women is much greater than the rate of increase for men. So the two lines go like this, right? But more men are going to college today than ever before also. Again, more women than men on campus, but the rate of increase is the difference, not that there's an increase. The second thing is when we say more women than men, let's ask the other questions. Which women and which men? The crisis on college campuses is not a crisis of middle and upper class white males who are still going to college. The crisis is really 75 to 80% of all black students on college campuses are female, and close to 70% of all Latino students are female, and about 2/3 of all working class students are female. So what we're actually looking at is a problem of class and race as much as it is about gender. So we have to ask the question about which ones. And then you have to say, okay, so what has happened is the collapse of the manufacturing sector, right? The fact that, for example, well, I'm in Pennsylvania, so the fact that, Bethlehem Steel is now basically an amusement park, right? They closed manufacturing plants. Those jobs for white working class guys are the ones that have fallen off the cliff. Those are the ones that are gone. Those guys are the ones who used to not go to college and be able to support a family in union-protected jobs. Those jobs are no more. So that's the first part. That's the numbers part. But the second part is to ask really the question, not don't they have to do this, but they already are. The thing that's most amazing to me is that in most families now, people are more equal than they ever have been. Our family lives are more egalitarian than they ever have been. Our social relationships are more egalitarian than they ever have been. Let me give you one example. Okay, I'm going to ask you the question that I asked my students. 25 years ago, when I started, I would ask my students, how many of you have a good friend of the opposite sex? Don't raise your hands yet. And I would get, 25 years ago, maybe 10%. Now I'll ask you, how many of you in this room do not have a good friend of the opposite sex? That's what I typically get. No hands. Maybe one. Most people have good friends of the opposite sex. Now take for a minute, now this is brand new, by the way. I grew up in the Harry Met Sally era. Did any of you ever see that movie, When Harry Met Sally? There's a scene early on in the movie, Harry and Sally are driving to New York City, and he says, we can never be friends, he says to her, because women and men can't be friends, because sex always gets in the way. And she says, no, it doesn't. She says, yes, it does. And he says, she says, well, so wait, what if you're not attracted to her? Then you can be friends. He said, you remember this at all? She says, you pretty much want to nail them too. You just can't do it. Women and men can't be friends. Take a look on YouTube. Just put in Harry Met Sally friendship. It'll come right up. And it's a scene that lasts about a minute and a half. That idea that women and men can't be friends because sex always gets in the way, you're living the refutation of that. Everyone in this room has a good cross-sex friend. Now think for a minute with me about the politics of friendship. Who do you make friends with? You make friends with your servants? You make friends with your boss? No. You make friends with your equals. You consider them your peers. So in our day-to-day experience, we have more experience, young people today have more experience with gender equality in their personal relationships than any generation in our history. By the time they go into the workplace, they are already familiar with the idea of being a colleague, being a coworker, being equal. Now, this is something that your parents are probably confused as hell about. Wait a minute. He's a boy and he's your friend, but he's not your boyfriend? No, Dad, he's just my friend, really. Well, we hooked up a couple of times, but really we're just friends. And then your father really doesn't get it, right? Because that's the Harry Met Sally mentality. So there's a really good example in our personal lives of how increased gender equality is actually part of our life. You can't do that if you're from Mars and Venus. Martians and Venusians don't get along. They don't form interplanetary friendships. So my argument here is that we are actually far more equal than we ever have been.
I guess to spread some light on the privilege part, a lot of men believe that the courts are largely in favor of women. Would you be able to explain to the audience how likely conviction for rape actually is?
How likely a conviction for rape actually is?
Yeah.
Fairly low.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm trying to understand, like, so.
A lot of men,
yeah,
especially college men, think that if they're gonna get narked on or if they like have sex with a woman while they're intoxicated, automatically, oh crap, I'm gonna go to jail. And a lot where the
right,
statistics,
or basically that she'll just change her mind in the morning, and she actually did sort of say yes, and then everyone's going to believe her.
Yeah, and
right,
a lot of people don't realize the psychological aspect that women have to go through.
Right.
Dealing with this.
Okay, so you're basically made the point for me. So that basically what you have is a kind of filter from all of the massive number the even massiver number of sort of unclear, gray area, not quite sure, to the clearly I was unconscious, I said no, I wasn't really, to the ones who say, and this is the biggest change, the ones who say, what happened to me was wrong, and then the smaller number who say, and I can do something about it, and people would be likely to believe me, and there's enough evidence that makes it not he said, she said, and that if I do this, there's enough evidence and people will believe me enough to prosecute. So you're down to about 1% here, I figure, right? From all of the ones that start, and then the ones that were clearly wrong, and the ones where your friends say, listen, yes, he's a creep. And yes, it was a really bad thing that happened to you. But you don't want to ruin his life, do you? Well, that shuts a lot. That's half of them right there. I didn't want to get him in trouble, right? I mean, that is possibly the most common thing that those of us who are in the sexual assault awareness biz hear. I didn't want to ruin his life. So, he's ruined yours, but that's okay. You'll get over it, he wouldn't. Right? Because men are so fragile, and we women are so resilient. Right? It's a strange dynamic, isn't it? Okay, so that's the funnel aspect of it, right? So isn't it ironic that given all of that, by the time you get down there, we're still saying, well, he said, she said. I don't think so. If it's down there, she said. It's probably true. We would definitely want, if you think about this filter, it's very likely. So that makes men, it's interesting that we're the ones who feel vulnerable, right? My feeling is, if she's unconscious, this is simple. If she's unconscious, that's closer to necrophilia than sex. This is easy. Right? Because your goal, at least my goal, maybe not yours, is not just to have sex, but to have good sex. To have sex that's fun, exciting, engaging. Unconscious people are usually incapable of that. And by the way, necrophilia doesn't count on your cosmic scorecard. So that's, but I'm not interested in just the quantity. I believe in, here's where I do believe in quality time. Right? I'm interested in good sex. Right? I want someone who wants to be with me, who says, here's what I want to do with you. Right? That's what I want. So the only way we're going to get there is if she wants you as much as you want her, and B, if she's awake, conscious, reasonably sober, not entirely, reasonably so, able to make decisions. So anyway, that's part of an answer to your question.
I don't know, I was thinking about how during your speech I kind of get the sense that you believe that people in their gender are somewhat flexible, or that maybe gender is kind of a superficial aspect of human identity. Do you believe there is like a problem of induction at play in most people trying to be like firm in their gender identity? And do you see benefit in having flexibility and fluidity and gender?
Sure. Well, there's two issues. First of all, I don't see it as superficial at all. Obviously, I think it's a core part of our identity. But do I think of it as malleable? Do I think of it as sort of more flexible? Absolutely. And first of all, I think it's flexible, and I mean that in two ways. First of all, because I don't think it's biologically anchored. I mean, we're all biological creatures, right? But here's my question to you. If it were all biological, if being a male made you a man and being a female made her a woman, then why do we have to police it all the time? Why do we have to worry about an adolescent boy? I don't know if, did you do this when you were in like middle school? Big thing in my middle school was you'd walk up behind some guy and say, look at your fingernails, look at your fingernails. Quick, look at it. Oh man, you are in trouble. Because if you look at them like this, you are a target. You look at them like this. We would walk up to guys and say, look at your fingernails. If they went like this, okay. Went like this, beat them up. Look at the bottom of your shoes. Okay, not okay. How you cross your legs, how you go. Guys, when you go to the movies with another guy, how many seats do you take up? 3, of course. You sit here, you keep an empty seat there, you keep your seat there. Why? Because you don't want anybody to think you're there together. Women, you go to the movies, how many seats do you take up? 2. Why? Because you want to talk to each other. Homophobia, which is so relentlessly policed that you have to worry about how you're looking at your shoes or looking at your fingernails. If it were biological, who would give a shit? Nobody. It would be like gravity. You don't have to police gravity, it does its thing. Right? But how come we have to constantly, relentlessly, every split second worry about how we're walking, how we're talking, how we're moving? That's not biology. Right? So do I think gender is important? Absolutely, it's central. Do I think it's biologically rooted? Well, it is in origin, but it is entirely shaped by our culture. Do I think it's therefore malleable? Of course. Most of us have this ideology. You remember those 4 rules? Those 4 rules of manhood, those go around, they're swirling around in our head, but you don't do them every split second. There are some times you say, well, you know what, I know that those rules are there, but I'm going to behave this way now. Or I'm going to do this, or now I'm around a little kid, or now I'm around a partner, now I'm around a dear friend. Yes, I feel deeply moved by this. I could even have an emotion. And I won't translate it into anger immediately. I'll sit with it for a few moments, right? So, what I'm saying is that's flexibility. So here's what I think. I think that what the women's movement did, basically, in the 1970s, there was this social psychologist who coded and categorized every single emotion, attitude, trait, and behavior as masculine or feminine, right? So traits like competence, assertiveness, ambition, coded as masculine. Kindness, gentleness, cheerfulness, nurturing, coded as feminine. So here's what the women's movement said. They said, wait a minute. Yes, we're kind and cheerful and nurturing, but we're also assertive, ambitious, and competent. Women can be both of those things. So they've claimed being whole people. Guys have always claimed ambition, assertiveness, and competence, but the next phase, which I'm sort of advocating, is that we become whole people, and that we also claim being careful, caring, cheerful, nurturing, etc., because those are part of being human. Right? So in that sense, I think we're definitely very flexible.
When you were talking about how people say that's okay, or like faggot and underlying cause is gender and not sexuality, I had a question. Do you think people can say that's so gay instead of that's so black? Without penalty or much attention, because the gay community is trying to be made invisible and have no face?
I'm not quite sure. It's hard to hear because a lot of the guys are leaving right now. But so basically, what I was suggesting in that, let me see if I'm getting your question at all. What I was saying is that very often when we say that's so gay, we think it's completely detached from real people. Because we don't imagine that the people in our immediate circle might themselves be LGBT. So therefore, it's detached from that. It's just generic, bad, wrong, stupid, whatever. And I'm saying that if you reattach it to real people, it would seem a lot weirder to say. It would seem a lot less permissible. In the same way, it would be impermissible to say, that's so Jewish, right? Or that's so black, right? We would see that. We would say, wait a minute, what are you talking about? So I'm saying that we make it equally, impermissible, but remembering that it's attached to real people. That's all. Maybe this is a good time to stop because the class seems to be dismissing. Oh, yes, we have one more question. No, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. I take it back. We have 2 questions, here and there. I'm sorry again.
Hola. Hello. The last quote that you spoke about, feminism will make it possible for men to be free, really resonated with me because it's such a simple, it's not simple, but it was so awesome. But I wanted you to maybe give a concise definition of what you think feminism would be. So, because there's a lot of different taboos that come in, feminism is very stigmatized. Like if a woman is over, confident and stuff like that and has an opinion, then she's a feminist. A lot of my friends think I'm a feminist because I'm that. So maybe for people who are not really studying women's and gender studies, maybe you give them your definition of feminism so they could, impose it and, help the revolution for that.
Sure. Look, I don't think this is really very complicated. Here's what I think. To support feminism, you need 2 things. You need to make one empirical observation and then take a moral position based on that. The empirical observation is very simple. Women and men aren't equal, right? Do you need me to prove this to you? Do you need all the data? You have it everywhere. You look at every board of trustees. You look at every corporation. You look everywhere, women and men are not equal, okay? The moral position is, but they should be. That's all you need. It is really simple. It doesn't mean to be a feminist or to support feminism. Does not mean you have to hate men. Doesn't mean you have to be lesbian. Doesn't mean you have to be unattractive. Doesn't mean you can still wear makeup and shave. You can do anything you want. All you have to do is share that empirical observation and that moral position. That is it, right? So I don't think it's all that complicated. Okay.
Hi. The point that you said earlier today was, when people say that's so gay, you're saying, it would be different if they said that's so black or that's so Jewish. Mm-hmm. Being an openly gay male myself, when you say that, to a degree, you're kind of stating that gay people aren't real people in my mind. I know you're not actually saying that, but, how would you, fight against that instead of giving the analogy of oh, gays not real people, but blacks are and Jewish people are?
Well, no. What I'm saying, I'm actually doing exactly what you're suggesting I'm not doing, which is to say, I'm saying to reattach it to real people, so that when I say, dude, that's so gay, that what happens in people's heads is, no, that's real people we're talking about. That's not just some abstract notion that we have now decided is synonymous with wrong or bad, but the idea that being gay is wrong or bad. So that's a real person thing. So I'm saying, just as it would be impermissible to say that's so black or that's so Jewish, because you would say, no, you can't say that because there were real black people or real Jews here, I'm saying exactly that what we have to do is concretize it, to reattach it to the people that we're referring to that we pretend we're not referring to. Right? By reattaching it, it makes it seem so much less permissible, right? So my hypothesis as a sociologist would be that among your friends, guys say that's so gay either very, very jokingly with a lot of irony, right? Like they would say, oh, you are so gay. Oh, yeah, of course. Or they monitor it, but what happens is every time it's far more conscious. Consciousness is the first step toward self-criticism, toward self-awareness, right? Saying it unconsciously and then defensively saying, no, I don't mean gay people. Well, you should. because that's what you're saying. So that's exactly what I'm saying. I completely agree. Yes?
Okay, so you shared your moment about how your whole process of research had begun with the two women speaking. Given that you are so interested in this, that kind of seems somewhat natural, but for the people that aren't really in tune with gender dynamics and all of that, how do you get them to start talking about it? And in your opinion, what would be the best way for a female to not be dismissed and need some kind of mediation in that awareness raising?
Right. There's two parts to your question. One is how do you get guys to start talking about this? And the second thing is, how do you as a woman engage with guys around these kinds of questions where you don't get the kind of patronizing, eye-rolling, oh yeah, of course, we can't say that around you, but we really feel it anyway. And I would say two things. First of all, I mean, the comment that I would make is what I try to do in this talk is I try to identify a whole bunch of issues that have been raised by feminist women. Equality in the labor force, balancing work and family, interpersonal life, parenthood, sexuality, all of which have been flashpoints in the relations between women and men. And what I don't really know, and I don't really care actually, what I've suggested is there's been this enormous feminist conversation going on for 40 years or so. And most men have thought it has nothing to do with them. So my job is to say, it has everything to do with us, and to participate in that conversation will actually improve our lives. That's my framework. So I don't really care about whether the guy sitting next to you, whether your point of